Gonna have to push some buttons here because for some reason they're making this private and we want it to be public. I just don't know, but I guess we're on. If somebody's here, please just chat so I can make sure it's working. And I'm sorry to start the thing this way. Let's get back to some flute. All right, we have a chat. Thank you so much. I'm glad to know that this thing is working. What an uncomfortable beginning. It's always weird, like I'm not sure when it's live or whatnot. But as long as the flute's out, let me just play a thing for you. Okay, the sound is getting lower because the frequency of the wave is getting longer because as I close these holes, the air column is getting longer. All right. But like while I'm here, that's the second harmonic of this thing. As within, so without, right? When you hear this note, my insides are mirroring that same ear column that I'm playing in the flute. But when I do this, I change something in me that actually lets you hear the second harmonic. So this is the first harmonic of this note. And that's the second harmonic. That's the third harmonic. And there's a fourth and a fifth and a sixth and a seventh and that. Like every vibration is actually a kind of infinite series of vibrations. Each higher one, a faster vibration, a higher harmonic than the fundamental thing. So this for me is like kind of at the root of my current obsession with harmonic astrology. It's like harmonics are anything that vibrates has vibrations within vibrations within vibrations within vibrations. If a vibrating string is happening, we are also hearing half of that string vibrate, a third of that string vibrate, or each of the thirds, each of the fourths, each of the fifths. And they're going to sound as different pitches. And actually, the thing that makes this sound like a wooden flute and this sound like a melodica is their timbre. And that's literally just the result of the strength or amplitude or volume of the higher harmonics above the fundamental notes. So they're very fascinating things just in life. There's many not astrologers who really wrote about harmonics as the secret to all that is. Because in a sense, if we like tune into the higher harmonics of us, I think it could kind of help us experience how you're a different instrument than I am. And we can see that in the natal chart, the root chart anyway. The root chart is the fundamental chart. Or is it? Maybe it's a higher harmonic of something lower and lower and lower until we just get back to the right, to the one vibration. And that's an intriguing thing to consider. All right, but I wanted to get kind of technical today and share with you one way that I'm currently playing with harmonics. This is the third video in a series. In the first, I kind of just described what it would be. The second one, sadly, I forgot to record because it's the one that, this platform is most likely to strike from the record. In fact, I did get an email about it. Because I don't know, I was getting into a particular chart example. And so, just to kind of let you know where we've been since you haven't been here from the beginning, perhaps, is I saw an interview of Jenny McCarthy and Donnie Wahlberg, who's married to Jenny McCarthy for 7+ years. You see Jim Carrey's chart here as well. Jim Carrey was in a relationship with Jenny McCarthy before Donnie Wahlberg and she were married. Um, and when I look at their charts together, I can tune into some synastry, right? Um, for the interview that I saw, which was on the High Wire, they were speaking about how they work on their relationship consistently, how every year they renew their vows. And, Donnie Wahlberg was like, I know that might sound cheesy, but like for us, it's a good way to kind of recreate and redevote ourselves and recommit. And so I just loved, and so I was really inspired in this kind of short amount of time of how they were talking about keeping their love and their relationship going throughout the years. Okay, so my intent was maybe in that first video to really kind of get into a harmonic analysis of relationship in each of their charts and then see if my hypothesis is right. And by the way, I haven't done any of this. I'm going to do it all live and on screen. And so we'll find out if maybe the harmonics I see that might suggest relationship secrets for each of them individually also appear to connect the two of them together. So we shall see. In the second video, I was intent on doing that, but instead, I wanted to share a little bit about why Jenny McCarthy was on the High Wire in the first place. And it's because she was speaking about how she helped helped her son cure himself of autism, which is not typically pronounced optism, but that's how it came. And let's be more optimistic about autism. And one thing I really loved in this interview is how she's like, we're not going to say, actually, even this is curing, right? So I just misspoke, but rather, what did she say? Like healing from. Maybe she did say curing, right? It's like it's not like this is some disease, right? He didn't have it and then he got it after some certain procedure in the mother's experience. And so it wasn't a disease, it was an injury, right? So maybe she was speaking about recovering from, right? Recovering from an injury versus like miraculously curing a disease. And they did this using alternative treatments, including, by the way, could you believe it? Nutrition, diet. Oh, really? Anyway, and chelation, which is interesting because as I was exploring in the second video of this series, Jenny McCarthy's born Aquarius rising. And so traditionally, she is a child of Saturn. Aquarius is Saturn's sign in the traditional view of astrology. Here's Saturn in the fifth. Saturn often represents some difficulties. Saturn's in Gemini in the fifth, the realm of the child. And in a sign that we sometimes associate with communication, she was unable to communicate with her son. This is going to be a huge part of how she learns life. And so what I did in the second video was look for her son in her chart, who is going to be represented by the fifth, maybe planets in the fifth, but maybe the guide of this fifth sign, which in the Aquarius design is Gemini, and therefore Mercury is the guide. And here's Mercury in exile in Sagittarius. Interestingly, I was speaking about this at a time when Jenny McCarthy, I think, was having a Venus return or the Moon Venus conjunction on her Venus last week. And now Mercury's pretty close to this Mercury Neptune in her natal chart. And I was like amazed and not at all to see that Mercury conjunct Neptune describes from an old school astrology point of view her child, especially her first child. And I believe she only has one. And there's something here about the challenges of also not being able to communicate and maybe kind of being lost in the dream world or whatnot. And so what I did in that second video was look for the harmonic aspect between Saturn, who's said to represent this native because Aquarius rising, as Saturn would in a Capricorn rising chart, especially when Saturn has a view of the ascendant, as Gemini and Aquarius are connected through the trine aspect or vision. But I was wondering, okay, so Mercury in Sagittarius, generally speaking, by plates, by whole signs, is opposite Gemini Saturn. There's some reception because Saturn's living in Mercury's sign, but this is not an opposite geometry, or as we used to call that opposition, a diameter, right? It's not half of the wheel, but rather it's a half minus about 17 degrees, right? And so I looked into that harmonic, and interestingly, it led to some connection of Mercury and Saturn in Jenny McCarthy's nativity in the 20th harmonic. Okay, well, what is a 20th harmonic? I mean, that's like, who's going to tell us, right? Because very few people have done the research into these higher harmonics, if you will. However, the beautiful thing about 20 is it's twice 10, which is twice 5. Or 20 is 4 times 5. And we can get after perhaps what the 20 might mean by looking at a combination of a square and a quintile being a fifth of the wheel, right? So in fact, if I cast a fifth harmonic chart of Jenny McCarthy's nativity, we're going to find, if I'm remembering this right, that Mercury and Saturn are square. So this is the fifth harmonic chart. Yes, and you'll see here in the fifth harmonic chart of Jenny McCarthy's nativity that Mercury here in the fifth harmonic Leo and Saturn here in fifth harmonic Taurus are square to one another. All right, in a square, which is a fourth of the wheel in a fifth harmonic chart, means that these two planets will be conjunct in a 20th harmonic chart. So there's been even fewer astrologers pontificating what the 20th harmonic will be. There's that conjunction, by the way. Interestingly, also Moon Neptune. There's a lot of vision in that. Interestingly, also Venus Mars. The 20th harmonic, also, by the way, Uranus in the IC. The 20th harmonic is strong for Jenny McCarthy regardless. But remember, the way that I got here is trying to look at how far apart Mercury and Saturn are. And I did that in the second video of this series. I don't want to do it too far further. I will just say this about 4 and 5. 5 is a creativity of play. 4 is a manifestation. Typically, think of a square as the result of some kind of tension or conflict. I imagine, and I'm completely projecting, and I haven't spoken to her, really heard her speak about this much. And in fact, I'm not even sure if her son was unable to communicate with her as many autistic kids are. I believe so. But think of this, right? Like, regardless of how, if she had to come up with creative ways to manifest an ability to communicate with her son, or she certainly, let the record show, had to come up with like creative ways to help him heal from this autism injury. Yeah, there's something about the 20 in there. There's something about the 20, and she's an actress and a broadcaster, and interesting, Saturn and Gemini, a judge on the show, I think it's called The Masked Singer. Part of my ignorance. But like, that's all to me crazy and amazing. 20s are very artistic. 5s are very artistic. And the 20, because it's a 4 with the 5, helps our creativity 5 manifest 4. I would say even more importantly for me, the 5 is what I call how we turn the noise into sound. It's like our personal experience of life and its pains and its pleasures and its beauties and its challenges, right? And obviously, um, well, I have to imagine that being the mother of an autistic child creates all sorts of new challenges we didn't expect, and therefore the necessity to respond in hopefully creative ways. All right. So video 2, I got a little deeper into that. All right, here in the video 3, I'm going to set out what I intended to do in the first place, which is to play with relationship harmonics, at least in Jenny McCarthy's nativity. Maybe I'll do this for Donnie Wahlberg too, and then maybe look at them together. That's my intention for this whole series. It might take one more video than this. We will see. It's something I've been practicing with clients in consultation over the last months, and I found it to be pretty significant and powerful. Now, how do we do relationship in charts anyway? Where I first studied astrology, which was with Daniel Jamario at the then Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, now Turning of the Ages Mystery School, they work with Venus as a symbol of the divine feminine and Mars as a symbol of the sacred masculine, and work with what they call the sacred marriage process. So I would likely be much more identified with my masculine and project my feminine. So kind of building an inner relationship with the feminine. Now, I was doing this with Venus and Mars for a good amount of time in my early years as a working astrologer. But I was also then challenged by several folks in my community who were doing kind of new versions of relationship and also exploring and expressing new versions, if you will, maybe not new, but different versions of gender, getting into binary, but non-binary experience, etc. And then I even found the languaging around the Venus and the Mars and the divine feminine and the sacred masculine, these kinds of things were really challenging some people. And I was like, all right, so if I try to do that in a different way, what would happen? Simultaneously, I was studying a lot of traditional astrology. Like in the first school where I studied, they don't do so-called rulerships. I don't love that word. I prefer the old language, which is domicile lord, which you and I would call a landlord. So Aquarius, like Saturn is the landlord of that house. Right? And so people with Aquarius rising, like they're kind of living or walking and learning in Saturn's house. So like I just as I said before, like because Jenny McCarthy's born with Aquarius rising, from the traditional astrology point of view, she's literally represented by Saturn in her chart, and Saturn is the steersman of her chart, right? So none of that comes from the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. That's something that I found in traditional astrology. And as I shared in the second video, looking at this Venus-Pluto sextile or trine to the ascendant, the Mercury-Neptune sextile to the ascendant, like these cats are in on it as well. They're also going to describe her. And do you think like what I learned actually looking at Wikipedia in that second video is that Jenny McCarthy was a Playboy centerfold, what do you, Playboy Playmate, I think Playmate of the Year, which feels very Venus Pluto, right? And in this trine to this path, you know? Anyway, she's also a broadcaster and she's an actress. Do you feel the Mercury Neptune there? Right? So, I mean, this is all like traditional astrology. My astrology's changed a lot. Okay. And in traditional astrology, there's many ways to go about everything, but typically if we're going to look at relationship, we're going to find significators of me and the other from the first me in the seventh other house. So when Aquarius rising, that's Saturn traditionally, right? Many modern astrologers, of course, would associate Aquarius with Uranus, but I'm going to stick today with Saturn, the old school point of view. And then with Leo at the descendant and therefore the cusp of the seventh house of othership and marriage, the partner is going to be represented by the sun, the landlord of the house called Leo. Now, some will say a second husband, and Donnie um, Wahlberg is Jenny McCarthy's second husband, will instead of being represented by the Lord of the seventh, be represented by the Lord of the ninth. I might not even go to Donnie Wahlberg's chart today anyway. I'm just going to look at the code husband, second husband, third husband, or no husbands at all, or wives, or whatever, that is written into this horizon. Aquarius rising, Leo setting, Aquarius first house, Leo seventh house, as described by the relationship between the so-called, I'll use this modern term, rulers of those signs, so Saturn and Sun. Okay, Saturn's in Gemini, Sun's in Scorpio. Let me put this thing away and tune into the brilliance of those of you who are joining me live. What is the aspect between the signs of Gemini and Scorpio? Go! And I'll drink a little tea as I wait for your genius to respond and to enlighten us. And I'm waiting. And maybe I'll play a little flute. Gemini and Scorpio, are they opposite? Gemini and Scorpio, are they trine? Somebody help me out here. I want to, while we're waiting, thank you, Winter. Quincunx also reflect upon a comment from Stephanie here, who said, interestingly enough, Jenny McCarthy wrote a book titled Louder Than Words, A Mother's Journey with Healing Autism. Yeah, thanks. And I had read that she had written some books on parenting, and I'm wondering if it's that, and specifically around parenting kids with autism and healing autism in children, or otherwise. But there's something interesting about Saturn, who describes her in Gemini in the fifth. I wouldn't typically see Saturn in her chart as like a career significator, but I'm intrigued to see that. She also does have Mercury, who, I'll use this modern word again, rules the fifth house of children and creativity and passion and risks in the 10th of career. So see writer, right? Mercury, Neptune, maybe fantasy writer, but in this case, writing how to heal, right? Something far out, maybe. Do you see? And maybe even something that can be hard. Saturn in Gemini, especially in regards to communicating and maybe speaking the harsh parts out loud, can be in that too. Do you see? I mean, interestingly, it's this Mars Uranus trine Saturn, and we could go on and on and on. But thank you, Winter. Yes, Gemini and Scorpio are quincunx, which means 5/12, right? From Gemini, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to Scorpio. All right. Traditionally speaking, the quincunx is said to be a blind spot. Now, there's some physiology to this. If I look through one eye, I actually have lacunas in my vision here and there at 150 degrees. This is the neighbors of the sign opposite me, right? My other eye, like this, like we get these lacunas. Now they're generally like, I don't know, heals, like averted. The aversion, to use the old words, is averted through the stereoscopic vision, which not all have. It's not something I've done. I have, according to some suggestions of the magical traditions, tied my dominant hand behind my back for a week. I have disciplined myself to realize which hand I typically carry the groceries with and which hand I open the door with, and switch that around. It's very good for you. Something I think would be good for me too is to wear an eye patch for a week or two and see what goes down. I'm guessing it would start by me stubbing toes and running into shit. But I really don't know, right? But something's going to change in my consciousness, and hopefully I'll do that sometime. Anyway, regardless, the whole idea of aspect theory, aspect means to see, is based upon the old Greek optic theory, probably coming from Kemet, the land we now call Egypt, which is basically that there are these 7 rays emitting from the eye that kind of print our reality. It sounds kind of new age in that regard. And to speak astrologically, there is the opposition the two triangles or trines, the two squares, and the two hexagons or sextiles. And therefore, there are four blind spots or inconjuncts. They're the neighboring signs, and they're the signs that neighbor the opposite sign, in other words, quincunx. Okay. And so when I'm doing this kind of relationship analysis these days, I often look to the so called lords or ladies of the first and the seventh signs. In this case, we have Aquarius rising, Leo setting. Yeah. And so Saturn and Sun, and we see an inconjunct. So there's something about blindness, there's something hidden. Okay, now that and that alone, when this is what is written in the nativity. All right, what are like shady experiences in relationship of hidden things? Anyone want to shout something out in the chat that might come through in some shady experiences with with which I just want to read, like Stephanie says, brush your teeth with the non-dominant hand every day. But all I saw first was brush your teeth, and it's like, yeah, my teeth are kind of yellow. I drink a lot of tea. Damn, that felt kind of harsh. Right? But yeah, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. See what happens. Right? This is the thing I love to do, is like to just hold the toothbrush steady and then move my mouth to brush my teeth, right? It's like another way where we can kind of play with the things that we typically do and like not get stuck in habits and let like more of our body intelligence and the synapses and whatnot come to life. All right. Anyway, yeah, could use a dentist. So what are some shady shit? So Stephanie writes infidelity. Absolutely, right? And by the way, um there can be cheating in relationships for people who were born with natal charts that don't show the rulers of the first and the seventh in conjunct. However, I have often seen when people are coming in and complaining of that experience or their suspicions of that experience, that can be the case. Okay, what are some beautiful possibilities when we have relationship significators in our astrology that are blind to one another? And I'll wait for some of your ideas around that. I think not deception. I'm guessing Winter wrote that as a response to the first thing, right? So, like some hidden stuff. By the way, like I've seen it expressed literally as people who didn't even know that their husband had a whole other family, right? That's infidelity to the extreme, I guess. Um, and deception too. I've seen it as I fell in love with this man. We got married. Turns out he was a con man and just waited until my bank account was in our name and then all the money disappeared and so did he. That's pretty extreme, right? I've seen it in cheating and some beautiful visions here of like, well, what about tapping into the things that cannot be seen with our eyes open, but only with our eyes closed? What if we can? And maybe this is a calling when we have inconjunct significators of the first and the seventh to find in our relationship experiences the ability to connect with another through hidden ways and to connect to hidden places with another together. That's how I like to productively work with an inconjunct. Right, but I will say that inconjuncts require some work. I mean, it can be difficult for us to even be conscious of them at all. And that's where sometimes a quincunx or neighboring things can be quote unquote worse than a square. Okay, because like the square, you have a problem and it's here to help you resolve it, which is going to help you evolve. Sometimes it's the problems we don't know we have that are worse than the problems we know we have. Do you feel me? Mm. So these are some of the kind of potential challenges with in conjunct rulers of the first and the seventh, according to this one approach to astrology. Whether it's right or wrong, right? That would be a method, like a method. Or no, it wouldn't. What would be a method then to work through that? And now hear that word work, because I believe the quincunx does require some work. First, it requires something that will bring its potential challenge into our awareness, into our sight. So something like some of the things that came in before, infidelity, something like this happens, and oh my gosh, I would have never believed it, and now suddenly, here we can see. And by the way, I don't know if any of this has anything to do with Jenny McCarthy's relationship experience. I really don't know much. There's one thing I read about Jim Carrey after they split up, and I think I'll get into that in the next video of this series. I don't spend much time looking at celebrity charts, by the way. I just don't know these people. I never will, and I'd rather do it while I'm sitting with them. I mean, that's something I've gotten to do. But I've never met Jenny McCarthy. I know very little about her. I'm like embarrassed myself reading even her Wikipedia page the other day. It's like, oh, didn't know about that. Anyway, I guess that's not embarrassing. But I was so inspired by her and Donnie Wahlberg in this very short interview on the High Wire recently. Okay. So this is one of the ways where I'm now encouraged to play with harmonic astrology. Let me show you that in Jenny McCarthy's chart, and maybe we'll do one other approach that I'll do, like relationship aside. So last time on harmonics and relationship astrology with Gemini Brett, I looked at relationship in her chart between her and her sun from a harmonic perspective, and it really seems to make sense, but I would need to check in with her about it to see if there's some reality to it. Um, what about this? Okay, so a couple things I do when we're looking at significators, in this case, Saturn, ruler of the first, Sun, the ruler of the seventh, that are in conjunct. Now, Scorpio in a hidden place, representing the other. Okay, 10th whole sign, Sun. I mean, she's been in a relationship with Jim Carrey, with Donnie Wahlberg now. She's married to one of the Backstreet Boys. There's like huge, shining, powerful being up in the kind of very visible place of honors and reputation and career. Right. But if Scorpio's in a hidden place, you might be even more um apt to experience some shady shit because Scorpio. No offense, I'm a Scorpio. All right, what's up, Jenny, homegirl? My son's right over here. Okay. So one way that I'll play is sometimes looking for a planet that, just from a platic or whole sign point of view, has an aspect to each of the planets in and in conjunct. Whether it's neighboring signs like Mars and Scorpio, like Mars and the Sun, Libra and Scorpio, or in quincunx signs like Gemini and Scorpio here. All right. And in this case, the moon in Virgo, which sextiles Scorpio and which squares Gemini. And you can see a very strong moon square Saturn and a very weak moon sextile Sun. They're kind of in a different thing when we look harmonically. Okay, so there's two terms I want to share again: platic and partile. Platic of the plates, the signs, the whole signs, and nothing but the signs. Virgo and Scorpio are sextile. Virgo and Gemini are square. Gemini and Scorpio are nothing. They're in conjunct. But in this case, should I use this moon or introduce the possibility of this Virgo moon as a magic mirror, I call it, or a magic square, because there'll always be a square to one of the two of an inconjunct, or a magic mediator? It's like Sun and Saturn, according to the old rules, they can't see one another, but Moon can see them both. So maybe Moon can help the two learn to communicate with one another from the different dimensions where they reside. even when I play those games, I prefer a planet that has kind of a stronger aspect thing. So here, anyway, we want to talk about harmonics. Okay, so the quincunx is about plates that are 5/12 of the circle away from one another. Right, so neighbors to the opposition, Gemini opposite Sagittarius, and its neighbors are Scorpio and Capricorn. So this Saturn in Gemini is blind to, according to the old Platic point of view, both Scorpio Sun and Capricorn Jupiter, which might be a significant concern for Capricorn Jupiter because he's living in Saturn's world and he can't see his teacher. Interestingly, the sun's in Scorpio, traditionally Mars's world, and there's an inconjunct. Mercury's in Sagittarius, living in Jupiter's world, and there's an inconjunct, right? This is like a very popular thing in Jenny McCarthy's nativity. In a sense, it's like, who cares? Venus is at home. It likes just running the show. What we call her final dispositor. And with that strong trine to the ascendant, that can increase. Anyway, let's talk about the harmonics of this Sun Saturn. So this would be applying harmonic astrology to relationship analysis based upon the arc or distance between the rulers of the first and the seventh. Now you could do this between Venus and Mars, like Venus and Mars are separated by 18.5 degrees. A little bit less, and I could go look at what harmonic that is. Okay, but I'm going to do this because Aquarius rising and Leo setting between Saturn and Sun, who are quincunx 150 degrees, but not, right? 115 degrees from 1947 Gemini is 1947 Scorpio, but the Sun's at 926 Scorpio. So let me go 150 to 1947 Scorpio from Saturn here in Gemini. Subtract 10 degrees. Okay, so that'd be 140 degrees. Takes me to 947 Scorpio. And then I have to subtract 21 arc minutes to get from 947 to 926. I'm going to just call that 40 arc minutes for the sake of easy math, because 40 arc minutes is 2/3 of a degree. Yes? Yes. So, all in all, this Sun-Saturn phase angle, or elongation, is 100 and almost 40 degrees, but it's 140 degrees minus 1/3 of a degree. In other words, it's 139 and 2/3 of a degree. Okay, what the heck do I do with that? And the answer is, if I want to do this manually, and I like to, because it helps me understand more about these things, I want to find out how much of a circle apart these two are. And so I'm going to take the circle's 360 degrees. Yeah, there will be math. Hold on, glasses. According to my calculations, we're going to take that 360 degrees of the circle, and we're going to divide it by 139 and 2/3, 0.66, right? Let me just make sure again. 140 from here brings me to 947 Scorpio. I subtract about 20 arc minutes, or 1/3 of a degree to get here. So 140 minus 1/3 is like 139.66 degrees, okay? So I divide the wheel by that number, and I get to find out on my calculator that Jenny McCarthy's Sun and Saturn in her nativity are separated by a 2.577th of the zodiac. Okay, what do I do with that? Well, this is where, if I want to find what harmonic this exists in, I perform a little mathematical guesswork game called Taming This Number. I want to multiply this by a number that results in a whole number. All right, and it's kind of tricky. What does this one do? Yeah. And I just kind of like, I've played with these things enough that I know that there's something that looks kind of 70 in this, okay? Let's just say, for example, we can say like 2.5, okay? Well, if this was exactly 2.5, I'd multiply it by 2, because 2.5 is 2.5. I multiply 2.5 by 2, and I would get the whole number 5. But as you can see, this isn't even 5.15, all that, right? So let me bring that back. Okay, maybe let's call it 2.6. We'll just round this up. All right, well, what is 0.6? It's 6/10. And if you remember how to reduce your fractions, 6/10 is 3/5. So what if I multiply this thing by 5? I'll get an even number. Not really. The answer here is multiply by 7. I have been working away on this nerdy spreadsheet, by the way, which allows me to do a little search for a number like 2.577. And it looks like none are found. So let me just see 2.57, and there's 8 examples found, including 7/18, which is 2.571. All right, well, this number is 2.577 or 2.578. Maybe I want to go a little higher than that. So I can just look for my next thing. Here's another 2.571. 1436. Yeah, well, that is 7/18. All right, let's keep going. This one's closer, 2.578. It is 1949. All right. But I'd rather stick with 18, like the lower the number, the better, okay? So let's look at this in a different way. Again, I'm just going to review the method with you again. I take the circle, I divide it by the phase, the distance from one planet to the other. Here I'm looking at relationships, so I'm looking at Saturn and the Sun because Saturn rules the first and the Sun rules the seventh. Me and the other. Me and the other. Me and the other. Okay? They're separated by 139.66 degrees about. I divide this thing by that. I get some weird number like this. And then I try to make that a whole number, or I go to my nerdy spreadsheet, which is what I'm actually literally doing. I'm like, I don't put that on the screen when I'm sitting with a client, right? I mean, now I'm like in Zoom sessions so much with my client, like that's happening on my computer screen. And then I'm like, this is like the 18th harmonic, and maybe get into that, okay? Anyway, I did see that in this number that if I multiply this by 7, I'm going to get very close to a whole number. See how close that is to 18. Exactly, 18.04, right? I mean, it's 18. Okay, so they are separated, is what this tells me, by 7/18 of the zodiac. Let's confirm that. Check your answers, math class. What is an 18th of the zodiac? We'll take the wheel, divided by 18. What's 360 divided by 18? 20, right? So an 18th of the wheel is 20 degrees. What is 7/18? 7 times 20 degrees is 140 degrees. They're 139.66. That's damn close to 140. Now, I can confirm this by creating a 20th harmonic chart. Sorry, a 18th, right? There's 7/18 away. An 18th harmonic chart should show me Sun and Saturn conjunct if the math was right. This is a 20th harmonic chart. I was like, no, but it was the wrong chart. Okay, 18th harmonic, see the Sun-Saturn conjunction? I learned this other interesting thing that Uranus is in on it. I learned this other interesting thing that this connects Mercury and Venus. Who knew? Well, there's sextile in her chart. Sextile is 60 degrees. An 18th is at 20 degrees. 20 plus 20 plus 20 is sextile, 60, right? So I should say this about the 18th. It is 6 times 3. It is also 9 times 2. So let me show you something else. If I cast a ninth harmonic of Jenny McCarthy's birth chart, which, by the way, almost all Indian astrologers will do, Jyotisha practitioners, so you mean it was Vedic astrologers, almost always cast the Nimvancha, or the ninth derivative chart, or the ninth divisional chart, basically in this language, the ninth harmonic chart, along with the Rasi, or the root chart, or the natal chart, the first harmonic chart. And the ninth harmonic chart specifically in that world tells us something about relationship. The ninth harmonic is said to represent the seventh house. So I don't know that they would then be looking to what's up with Sun and Saturn, because in the natal chart they rule the first and the seventh. First of all, if I use a sidereal zodiac, they wouldn't anyway. It would be the sun and the moon, but let's stay here. What I want you to see is this opposition between Sun and Saturn in the ninth harmonic chart. Let's go to the grid. Sun opposite Saturn within 3 degrees. Definitely within the orb that I'm going to use for an opposition, and especially in the harmonic chart. All right, well, they're not exactly opposite, 3 degrees. Well, 3 degrees of orb in a ninth harmonic chart, you divide that 3 by 9, you're going to get 1/3 of a degree. They're within some kind of 18th within 1/3 of the degree, as we saw. We saw that 7/18 of the zodiac is 140 degrees. That Jenny McCarthy was born with Sun and Saturn separated by 139.6 degrees, within 1/3 of that 140. Why do I say 18th when I'm looking at ninth harmonic chart? Because an opposition is two-ness. So when I see an opposition in a ninth harmonic chart, that means a conjunction. Sun Saturn opposite in the ninth chart means a conjunction in the 18th harmonic chart, Sun Saturn. By the way, the dog's going to bark soon, according to my premonitions, or maybe that text message. So please prepare yourself. It will be real. And so here in this 18th harmonic chart, I see Sun and Saturn separated by about 6 degrees, a little bit more. Okay, but what is 6 divided by the harmonic 18? And the answer is 1/3, 0.33. It just shares with me that they're within some kind of 18th, within 1/3 of a degree. So it's tight. It's definitely strong enough for me. Okay, what do I mean by some kind of 18th? Well, they could be 20 degrees away. Are there anything here that are 20 degrees? Is there anything here that are separated by 20? I mean, Venus and Mars are pretty close. They're more like 18.5. So in the 18th harmonic chart, Venus and Mars, it doesn't really show up. But look, Venus and Mercury do. There's the dog. Again, why? Because Venus and Mercury are separated by 60 degrees. And 60 is 20 and 20 and 20. Right? 20 degrees being an 18th of the zodiac. So this is 3/18 of the zodiac. But 3/18 can be reduced to 1/6 sextile. Okay? 7/18 cannot be reduced. But in a sense, in harmonic astrology, while we are interested in that 7/18 versus 5/18 versus 3/18, especially numbers like 7/18 that cannot be reduced, we're interested in that. In general, we're most interested in 18. What is 18? How does 18 work? And maybe we go to some resources around that. Like, well, you know, sadly, David Hamblin wouldn't have looked at the 18th in the spirit of numbers, because he's only exploring prime numbers, and the 18th is not one because it's 9 times 2. So he's like, 18th is going to be like 9. Many will say it's like the relationship version of nineness. So now we have to understand what is nineness, all right? And who's to say? Well, at least some people have done some research into the thing. Now, for me, like nine is a very, I experience nine in a different way than David Cochran teaches nine. So this is David Cochran's Vibrational Astrology, the Essentials. Let me just kind of read to you like this the short nine transmission here. Sense of wholeness and community and well-being, healing. I see the nine as a very highly spiritual essence. So yes, in Indian astrology, the D9 chart, the Nimvamsha, speaks to marriage, interestingly. Seventh house. But some say it is also reveals the fruit of the tree that is expressed by the Rasi. That's the root chart. In other words, the natal chart, the first harmonic chart. There's something very high soul in the nine, which is a trine in a third harmonic chart. It's a trine of a trine. Right? It's like very close to the Trinity. Right. So for me, and when David like very much relates nines to community, but I think it's the community that's the result of the intention for fellowship. And I don't mean just like hanging out with the fellas. I mean connecting with fellows like you who are also into this weird shit. Right? So I'm really sad that we can't be doing this in a room right now and sharing thoughts with one another. Like I just opened up a window so I could see your some comments here. Yeah. Including, yeah, people always freak out when they see the north and south nodes of the moon conjunct in divisional charts, only in second or even number divisional charts. But yes, it's a weird thing, and I'm not going to go into why all that is. I will be teaching a deep dive course on this stuff down the road. I'm still very much experimenting. And one of the experiments I'm conducting is I take this little herb and I chew on it. That's one of my experiments. I also do peppermints. I also do experiments. And one of the experiments that I'm doing, yes, by the way, English is my first language, working on it, is I'm sitting with many clients every day, not the weekends, usually one. And one of the things that I'll look into, if need arises, is perhaps the harmonic relationship between the rulers of the first and the seventh to see if that has anything to say about how they do relationship. All right. And what we get is 18 for Jenny McCarthy. Well, 18 is like 2 and 9. It's like doing relationship in nineness. So I'll just read here again in David Cochran's Vibrational Astrology, the Essential, on this page 166 of short meanings of some vibrational charts. 9 vibe, sense of wholeness and community and well-being, healing. Well, let me read 18. Shared sense of community, healing, and wholeness. What? Shared. Othership, because that's 2. The diameter, the opposition, like the first and the seventh house. And in some senses, in this design, I might suggest that her 9, as far as the Sun and Saturn, the rulers of the seventh and the first, respectively, are concerned, are going to come alive through othership. Right? So it's like deep spiritual learning in relationship. First of all, welcome to fucking Earth, right? Like that's what we're all doing if we're turned on and tuned in or tuned out or whatever that one is, But that's in the code of this chart. And it's not like deeply apparent. It's not like these kind of conflicts or something squares. It's more built into the design that the stimulus of working through maybe some hidden things, that's me relying on the inconjunct and the Rasi and the natal chart, is going to help us evolve spiritually. Now, in some ways, like, so I would not apply that to her relationship with her son, because traditionally the son, the child, is not found in the seventh house. They're found in the fifth. So her son would not be represented by the ruler of this seventh Leo, which is the sun, but rather by the ruler of the fifth Gemini, which is Mercury. And that's what I did in video two and spoke a bit about a little bit earlier. All right. So my question is, does Donnie Wahlberg's relationship harmonic, if I dare call this that, have something to do with this whole thing? Now, let's just do another example here. If I was looking at Venus and Mars, I see that they're 18 degrees away from one another. They're really more like 18 and a half, or they're 18 degrees and 25 arc minutes. That's a little bit less than 18 and a half. Let's get the calculator out. According to my calculations. So first of all, how much is 25 arc minutes? I divide that by 60 minutes in a degree, and it's 0.4166 of a degree. So Venus and Mars are separated by 18.4166 degrees. All right. I'm going to divide the wheel by that. And I get 19.54. I'm going to multiply that by 6. No. What is it? Who are you? 8. No, my bad. I'm going to get my nerd sheet out. So in this thing where I've just divided 1 by 1 and 1 by 2 all the way to 33, and I'll be adding lines to this, I can search 1954. And actually what I'm going to search instead is just 0.547. And where do we, nothing's there. Let me do 0.55. Okay. So it's like 9/5. So in other words, I should be able to multiply this thing by 9. It's actually, so 5/9 is 0.55. If I multiply this by 9, I'm going to get this number, but I'm up in the 176th harmonic. Like, that's not going to do it for me. So actually, when things get really close to one another, it gets a little bit harder. I can see that they're, relatively speaking, about 18 degrees apart from one another. Well, that's a 20th, right? As we saw before, we actually went at it the different way. But if we go to her 20th harmonic chart, and actually this was just something I noticed in her 20th harmonic chart, we're going to see Venus and Mars very close to one another. Close enough for harmonic conjunction in my book for sure. It's interesting to see Sun, Pluto too. The reason why I got to 20 before is I was trying to find which harmonic her Mercury and Saturn are in to see something about her relationship with her child. And then Venus and Mars are in it as well. So if I was personally still inclined to look at relationship in Venus and Mars, I'd start with, oh, they're cohabiting. They're both in Libra. But I might also look at that actual arc, and it's pretty close to the 20th harmonic. So again, 4 and 5, like manifesting creative. Okay, let's look at Donnie Wahlberg's chart here. Thank you, Jenny McCarthy. I mean, first of all, I just kind of also love to ask, how is this landing for y'all out there? I mean, it's really difficult when we get the calculator out. I like to share technique. Yeah. Chrissy, you're reminding me that the link for part one is not in the description box of part two. I'll put it in there. I'll try to make a little playlist with these things. I'm just doing a lot. I did say I would, so sorry about that. And when you look to my homepage, go to, there's a tab for live videos. That's where you're going to see all my recent stuff. So when you just go to the page, I think actually if you go, anyway, when you just go to the page, there's a tab for live videos. Go there and you'll see all the recent stuff. Okay. Winter totally nerding out on my spreadsheet. Yeah, I am too. Okay. So yeah, hopefully like, again, like when I'm with a client, I'm not like doing all this calculator stuff, of course, right? I'm like doing this behind the scene and seeing if I can make a delineation that helps in some way. So, like, what about 18? I would say, hey, like if somebody's like really struggling in relationship, I'd be like, you're kind of coded in such a way that invisible things in relationship will require work so that it helps you kind of connect and expand in spirit and also like connection and fellowship. Now that might just sound completely trite because I think that's supposed to be part of the human condition. And sometimes astrology gets like that. But I'm hearing that in the code. Okay, so let's see what we hear in Donnie Wahlberg. Imagine if I actually knew a Backstreet Boys song and so I could sing something right there. What a cute joke that would be. I don't. Um, anyway, Aries rising, so symbolized, interestingly, by Sagittarius Mars from an old school point of view. Mars, who's here in the 8th house, this is a Placidus house chart, but in the 9th whole sign. So I'm intrigued by that. Anyway, relationship axis, 1st, 7th, Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Libra. So what's the relations? Oh, interesting. Here's another inconjunct, right? Venus is in Cancer, Mars is in Sagittarius. Try to feel safe when you go courageously out to the great wilderness, you see. Try to stay home when you go out to the wilderness. And interestingly, with him on tour so much, I'm kind of interested in that contemplation in and of itself. I mean, he does have the ruler of the 4th, Cancer, setting. So there's a deep kind of relationship to family, and maybe also in his partnership principles, a way to connect to the family of partner. I don't know, but we have an inconjunct here, like we did with Jenny McCarthy's chart. That's interesting. I would call that like a synastry. Okay, like when I put their charts together, I'm not going to say, well, I'm first seeing, okay, wow, Jenny McCarthy's Mars Uranus are on Donnie Wahlberg's descendant. That certainly seems to be representative of needing to do some work in relationship. Her Libra, Mars Libra, like surrounding his descendant degree. That's nuts. His moon there, his moon, her Mars, exact to the arc minute. What? Her, by the way, her chart is a Rodin rating and his is a AA rating birth certificate. Oh, look at that. Her Uranus on his descendant moon with Mars. His Uranus on her Venus, right? So that's like synastry, one of the ways we do synastry. Her Mars is in his 7th house. His Mars is in her 10th or 11th, depending on how you want to slice the thing, etc., right? But what I would say is kind of hidden synastry is something like, oh, for these two partners in a marriage, they each have in their natal charts their rulers of 1st and 7th inconjunct. That's something they share. By the way, my partner, my beloved Scorpiana, and I don't really have much classical synastry. And I love her. And I think we do really well together. And she loves me, and I know it, right? So I'm consistently challenged to find methods of astrology which will help me understand why I love her, right? No, I can tell you why I love her without astrology. There's a I could count the ways, you know? But I'm also on this quest to say, well, how does astrology say we're meant to be together? And you know, and so I get into midpoints and interesting things that I didn't know how to see before. And one thing I found out just this morning, doing this for me, which I hadn't yet, is that I have the rulers of my first and seventh, who are Mercury and Jupiter respectively, in a 33rd harmonic. And Anna has the rulers of her first and seventh, who are Jupiter and Mercury respectively, also in a 33rd harmonic. Wow. So what if Donnie Wahlberg, like Jenny McCarthy, who he's now been married to for 7+ years, and that means that they have renewed their vows at least 7 times, according to this interview I heard. What if he also not only has the rulers of the first and the seventh in conjunct as Jenny McCarthy does, but also in some kind of 18th harmonic? Now, that would be like a stretch, right? I wouldn't expect that for everyone. I'm very excited to see that Anna and I have that in our nativities, and then I get this new thing to play with. Can the 33ness be a tool for Anna and I to grow together in our relationship, and maybe even a tool to help us through some of the challenging times? And a tool to help us expand into levels and places we didn't even know about. And what is the 11th or the 33rd? Well, the 33rd is the 3 of the 11, so I might start with the 11th and the 3. And I talked about it with her a little bit earlier today, and I sounded even weirder than this. Which is probably good for the 11, but I don't know if it's good for the relationship. But the code says yes, so I guess it was cool. Anyway, let's do the same thing for Donnie Wahlberg, who has Mars and Venus representing his first and seventh respectively, and they are separated by what? 150 from Venus would take me to 1703 Sagittarius. I'm going to subtract 6, so 150 minus 6. I mean, this is just a biquintile. 150 minus 6 is 144 degrees. That's 2/5 of a circle. So Venus and Mars within 35 arc minutes of biquintile. So that means if I go fifth harmonic for Donnie Wahlberg, we are going to see Venus and Mars connected. Now, so when I'm looking for Jenny McCarthy at Saturn and Sun in the 18th harmonic, and I'm actually just want to look at the 18th harmonic for Donnie Wahlberg. And maybe looking at his 18th harmonic in synastry with her 18th harmonic might say a thing. That's something I was doing with my chart and Anna's chart this morning. Instead of doing my email as I promised myself I would. Sorry if I owe any of you out there an email. I'm bad at it. Let me change these aspects here. So the 18th for him also shows Mercury Venus. There's a Neptune Chiron. I mean, that's the main thing I see, because remember, she had Mercury and Venus in her 18th, because she has Mercury Venus sextile. Does he? Yes. That's an interesting, like, kind of synastry thing for them. They both have a really strong Mercury Venus sextile. Anyway, if we cast the fifth harmonic chart for Donnie Wahlberg, we're going to see a Venus-Mars conjunction. All right. If I cast the 20th harmonic chart, we're going to see Venus and Mars as well. They'll be further apart than they were in that one. And then interestingly, Jenny McCarthy also had Venus Mars in her fifth harmonic, right? So if I was like completely basing a relationship analysis on Venus and Mars, then my little hopeful hypothesis that folks who are doing super well and working on their marriage might share some kind of harmonic resonance in the rulers of their, or the significators of relationship, like I would have been a win in this video. Instead, I'm certainly not going to call it a loss. But for him, it's Venus and Mars in a five by quintile. For her, it's Sun and Saturn, or let me say Saturn and Sun, because Saturn rules her first and Sun the seventh, in um, some kind of 18. That is the announcement of my beloved coming home. And so we're going to look at Jim Carrey later in the next part of this series. But let's just be there for a bit. Like, what if she's meant to do relationship in some kind of 18, which is like 9, and he's meant to do relationship in some kind of 5, to help them both like work through some kind of inconjuncty, perhaps blind thing, to tap into the beautiful bit of like that which we cannot see, which is heavenly realms and the mysteries and magic and love, can live in that realm and hopefully come into this one. So the 5 would be like much more playful, creative. In this interview, I watched this music video he made with a bunch of his famous friends, which was a song to help you survive your lockdown. I was kind of surprised they showed it on the show, actually. But anyway, Jenny McCarthy's like dancing in the video, right? So Donnie Wahlberg of the Backstreet Boys probably really loves it when his wife's dancing to the song he's producing. There's like a 5-ness. I don't know if she sings, if they've created things together or something. I did see a cut recently. I guess it was also in that Highwire interview where he was on that Masked Singer show. So she doesn't get to see him because he's in a mask. But she like called him out, knew it was him. Like that's actually a really fun, interesting literal expression of this inconjunct, right? Like he's here, but I can't see him because he's wearing this mask thing. Didn't trip on that at the time, but because I hadn't seen their charts at the time. But now I'm like, whoa, dude was like a masked singer as she was judging or whatever. Um, anyway, things to play with, and again, for me, like less than doing these things in synastry. I'm just very interested in exploring harmonics in an individual's chart between many things. So let me do one more quick example for Jenny McCarthy here before we're done. I noticed this jumping off the screen, and so I think it's fun to share. One other way I'm looking at this is the midheaven degree and the ruler of that. Traditionally, Scorpio ruled by Mars, right? So there's an inconjunct here too. Some like hidden things maybe in career. Um, and how do I Libra Mars to help fulfill my Scorpio promise and my reputation and whatnot? By the way, Mars had to be exiled in Libra here with Uranus, and one way she's been kind of exiled is like people shaming her for the quack remedies that she believed she used to heal a condition in her son that she believes was caused by a treatment that science has proven it can't be. Right? Like, pay no attention to the fucking evidence, right? Anyway, so that's kind of an interesting thing just in regards to reputation, which is very much a 10th house consideration. We see Mercury in the 10th with Neptune and yada yada yada, and she's a writer and she's a broadcaster. See Mercury. Sagittarius, we're hoping that is a kind of an expansive thought. Neptune, maybe even mystical. I also, by the way, look to the highest part of the chart, which would be 3 Scorpio, always square the ascendant, and then the sun's closest. So Scorpio sun, right? And I think she first came on the scene, in Playboy magazine. So there's something there. I think there's something in the Venus Pluto to probably support that also. Yes. All right. Anyway, if I just go, okay, midheaven Scorpio, where's Mars? Libra, how far away? Some of you would be inclined to look to Pluto, and then you would have to go 53 degrees, which is very close to a septile between Pluto and this midheaven degree. Pluto, septile, midheaven. a degree and a bit. 7's pretty out there. But I want to look to Mars, more traditionally inclined when I go work with dispositorship. So how far is Mars from here? Okay, in conjunct neighboring signs, 30 degrees by plates, but this is 36 degrees. It's more like 35 and a third, but I'm going to say 36 first. 36 degrees is 1/10 of the chart. That's probably going to show up here as a decile between Mars and the midheaven within 2/3 of a degree. So if I cast, by the way, since it's a 10, I could cast a 10th harmonic chart and we would see Mars in the midheaven conjunct. I could cast the 5th harmonic chart and we will see Mars and the midheaven opposite. Okay, so 10th is kind of 2 and 5. So in some ways, it's like doing creativity, 5. 5 so much more than that, but let's say that. Powerful creativity with others, which you might just get by Scorpio and Mars is in Libra. All right, but it's there in the harmonic thing. So that's just another application, right? I could even do like the ruler of the 7th from the descendant degree. And let's do that. We'll do one last one. So the sun is in Leo, sun is in Scorpio, which squares Leo, but the square from 3 Leo is 3 Scorpio. So we're going another 6, 26. So it's 96, about 96 and a half degrees. Or let me get more specific. It's 96 degrees and 26 arc minutes. 26 arc minutes is 0.4333 degrees. So 96.43333. Divide the wheel by that. It's going to be about 4, which would happen if we divide by 90. But it's less. It's 3.73, which is very close to 3.75. It's very close to 3 3/4, which means I can multiply this by 4 to tame it to a whole number. It's about 4/15. The 15th, by the way, shows up as a trine in the 5th harmonic chart. 5 and 3, 15. Okay, so Sun trine descendant in the 5th harmonic chart. If we cast a 15th harmonic for Jenny McCarthy's nativity, we're going to see Sun conjunct descendant. And interestingly, the moon's in on it too. Now, 15, we saw 20s and 5s. It's like a lot of 5, 5, 5, which we should expect in an artist and somebody who generally resonates as maybe playful. That's like not Saturn's thing, but Saturn and Gemini more than other placements likely. We saw a 5 in Donnie Wahlberg, at least when it came to the distance between Venus and Mars, who respectively represent his 7th Libra and 1st Aries houses. So Venus and Mars are biquintile in Donnie Wahlberg's nativity, 144 degrees or thereabout. Well, let's do this one also. How far is Venus from the descendant? Much closer to a square. This one's 90 plus 3, 14. So 93 and a quarter. I'm just going to divide a circle's 360 degrees by that. 360 over 93 and a quarter, which is the distance from the ruler of the 7th to the 7th. And we get 3.86. 86, who are you? 88 is a 9 because 0.11 is 1/9. So 0.88 is 8/9. I can multiply this by 9 and get pretty close to a whole number, but see how far off it is? That's not my guy. Is it 8? No. So this is kind of, I usually just trial and error these, or I might put in my nerd sheet. It's 7/27. Okay, so there's a fun thing there actually. And this is where the skeptic in me is like, dude, you're just doing so much math that you can just prove you're yourself correct. Like, isn't that what astrology is? You're a charlatan. Shame on you. Get ready for hell, right? And then I remind myself, no. Um, Check this out, right? So the rulers of the first and the seventh in Donnie Wahlberg's nativity are in a five. They're biquintile, 2/5 of the circle. The ruler of the seventh from the descendant degree in his wife Jenny McCarthy's chart is in five. Really 15, which is 3/5. Jenny McCarthy has the rulers of the first and the seventh in an 18th harmonic, which is 9 and 2. Donnie Wahlberg has the phase angle between the ruler of the seventh and the descendant degree in 27, which is 9 and 3. Boom. So let's break it down. If I'm playing in these two different ways, the harmonic aspect between the rulers of the first and the seventh to learn something more about relationship, and also the harmonic aspect between the ruler of the seventh and the descendant cusp, I get for both of these 5 and 9 for this wife and this husband. That smells like a thing. All right. So go play. Take what you learned here in this weird sandbox and see if you can make mud that actually sticks. Thanks for spending time with me. The present of your presence is amazing. If you like the video, please like the video. Support the channel. Share it around with other fans of the magical mysteries like us. And you can book a session with me at GeminiBrett.com. And we could tune into this together and see if it's for real. Winter writes, new kid on the block meets girl next door. And I don't know if it's a Dracula face or a pukey face that's kind of nearby, but I think that's in response to a message above. Yes, fun. Fun with numbers, but is it real? It kind of shows itself to me that it is. And I'm just very young in this research, but it's pretty cool. And I haven't seen people using harmonics like this yet. I'm sure it's done. Yeah. Nothing new under the sun.